9:04 on the clock. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan, and as we've been promoting on air and online, right? We got some special guests over via StreamYard, and the platform is facebook.com/1059 Neo Retro. We're gonna be having an amazing morning. We're gonna be a bit chatty too, as opposed to the regular music programming, because we'll be talking about why do we need to study history. And I want to start this interview with this quote that one of my professors, I guess, dropped during one of our lectures, and really funny too, because the guests that we have over, I just recently found out, were actually professors when I was in university at UP Los Baños. So maybe these words are familiar to them. But I want to start this interview again by the words of Professor Patrick Ollett. He said, "History is not a story of good versus bad. In fact, the more you study history, the more you're presented with questions rather than answers." And with that, I want to welcome to the program and get their take on that statement. And of course, the whole shebang when it comes to history, right? Again, the topic is why do we need to study history? We got Vec Alporha. She is an assistant professor of history at UP Los Baños, and she graduated with a BA in social sciences in UP Baguio and an MA in history from UP Diliman. Welcome to the show, Vec.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for dropping by online. Also, we got Lee Candelaria. He is a PhD student and teaching fellow at Hiroshima University, Japan, and graduated with BA and MA in history degrees from UP Diliman. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right. So that being said, I want to thank you so much for your time and again dropping by the station at 9 in the morning. And hopefully, you guys, our listeners, can also leave questions. And if you guys have any comments, feel free to drop by the Facebook page. Again, that's facebook.com/1059 Neo Retro. To get to know our speakers a little bit better, I have this question that I kind of always ask my professor history, like my professors of history, or at least like my friends who are public historians. And I want to get to, I guess, your answers as well. So, what is your favorite historical story? Maybe we can start with Vec, because I think it also shows a lot of a lot of your personality and insights, right?
hmm that's a difficult question actually because there are a lot. Pero siguro ngayon, since I am very much interested in the history of social movements, I think I would like to share the 1975 Latondenya strike. So this was,
Mm,
in the midst of martial law, 1975. So
mhm.
all kinds of protest activities were effectively banned, and that included labor strikes. But during that time, there was labor activists and unions found a loophole in the declaration, in the martial law declaration, in the presidential decree banning these strikes. And the rules laid down by the dictator Ferdinand Marcos was that you are not allowed to conduct labor strikes on essential goods, on essential industries. La Tondena was a distillery, right? So
Right.
they said it's not an essential industry, so they managed to use that loophole, and they actually succeeded. So the strike went on for days. It was carefully planned para hindi magkagulo, so that no one would get hurt, and it was
Right.
actually successful. They achieved their demands. They managed to regularize thousands of employees from that factory. They managed um, to abolish a particular rule in the company, whereas workers were required to take IQ tests when it was
Mhm.
completely irrelevant to their job. So I really love that story because um, it showed us the results of collective action among different sectors, because different sectors worked for the strike, not just workers but also students, really the religious sector, like the progressive Catholic priests and nuns. So I really love that story. I like telling that story to my students.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing, Vec. By the way, do you want me to call you Professor Vec? Like, I should
No,
have
please
asked
call
this
me
off.
Vex, please.
Just Vec. Got it.
Yes, please.
Good morning, Lee. What about you? What's your favorite story in history?
Well, because my field of specialization is on the Second World War, perhaps my favorite historical anecdote would be that during the war, Filipinos were taught Japanese by the Japanese, of course, Japanese
Mhm.
language. So, like for greetings, they would say "konbanwa," which is good, good evening, or I think one way to honor the Japanese emperor was to say "banzai," and the Filipinos subverted that. So instead of saying banzai, they would say bangkai. Or instead of saying konbanwa, they will say kabayo. And the Japanese won't really notice if they're saying it wrong because, But for Filipinos, it's a way to subvert the Japanese. So even if at least on the surface they are doing what the Japanese are telling them to do, like say these Japanese words. They're
Mhm.
trying to make meaning out of it and trying to make them look bad. So at least kahit papaano, no, they were able to get back at the Japanese. So perhaps that's one of the more interesting anecdotes I have for that period.
Got it. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, I want to move on to our next question, which I know you tackled during one of your episodes. History 101. Why do we study history? But for the sake of our listeners and our viewers as well, who have yet to go to your podcast, PODKAS, I want to tackle what made you want to pursue a degree in history? Because again, just because during the intro, man, these credentials again, MA from UP Diliman. Lee is also a teaching fellow at Hiroshima University. So, what made you want to pursue a degree in history? Maybe we can start with Lee this time around.
Well, before I answer that, Vec is also about to leave for Hawaii to do to do her PhD in history. So, yeah, it's really a thing for us. Why? Where did this start? Ako, when I was in high school, everybody was into nursing. Everybody's taking up nursing, or at least are interested in taking up nursing. There was a nursing boom that time, and for me, my father was telling me also you also have to be a nurse so that you can go abroad and you can leave the country and then you can just send money back home. And I was like, I want to do something that I'm interested in. So I started looking into what courses are heavy in writing because I like writing, and history is one of the courses that are intensive, writing intensive. And then at that time, I was also thinking that I want a course that could lead me to a possible career that I could be interested in. And history is one of the pre-law courses in UP Diliman. I think there are five specified courses that are really pre-law, and history is one of them. So I'm thinking, if I'm not really interested in history, or if I find out that I'm not really that fond of history, then maybe perhaps after I finish history, I can move on and take up law. And it was when I was in college that I realized I actually love history. I love writing. I love reading about it. I love talking about it. So I just stuck with it. And now I'm proud to say I'm a historian. Although that's kind of cringy also, but yeah.
Why is it? Maybe we can talk about that later on. Like why you think it's cringy. But I want to
Sure.
hear from Vec as well. Like what made you want to pursue a degree in history? And congratulations, by the way, for your PhD in Hawaii.
Yes, so thank you. Well, I didn't start college as a history major actually. My original course was communication in UP
Mm.
Baguio. I wanted to be a journalist. Until now, I still have that yearning to become a journalist. And then when I entered UP, I took up history one, of course. In UPLB also took up history
Yes, his
one,
one.
and you take it as in the first semester, right, of your freshman year. And the moment I mean, as we go through the semester, parang ang galing nito ah. I was really hooked. I was really interested. But I think what really drew me to it was that it's all about telling stories, and I like telling stories. That's why, perhaps that's also why I was drawn to journalism. And I think, parang yung history is just it's just a deeper way of going into these stories, sabi nga nila, journalism is history in a hurry. So parang
Right.
ganon. So that's why I really liked it. And I actually pursued a career out of it. Kasi marami naman tayong classmates nung BA na nag-take din ng history. But, eventually went to other professions. Like, yun nga, tulad nung sinabi ni Lee, they eventually took up law, or they went to civil service. Others went corporate. And history are actually, and a degree in history is actually helpful um,
Mm.
in all of those fields. Kasi they teach you how to read critically, to analyze sources, to analyze documents, So may mga analytic skills involved. Pero sa akin, yeah, I decided to pursue a career in the academe. Tapos ito na nga, we're starting a new journey. Well, basically, I just really love telling stories and reading stories. That's why.
Got it. Got it. Now, again, the episode History 101, Why Do We Study History, is actually up on Spotify for you guys who want to, I guess, listen to a more extensive answer. Because I understand that Aaron was also there, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
he also talked about why he studied history. That being said, before we go on to a quick break, I want to talk about current events from a historian's perspective, right? Incoming PCOO chief, Attorney Trixie Mattel. I'm kidding, no, not Trixie Mattel. Attorney Trixie Cruz Angeles said, and I quote, questioning historical events or even established facts should not be prohibited. End of quote. Now, as you guys are the experts in the field, as you guys are the historians, I want to I want to know your take on that statement because social media has been a buzz. You got people saying, "Yeah, that's right. Discourse shouldn't be limited," and then you got another, I guess, another side of the conversation where they're like, "Yeah, but it's already these are already established facts." But again, and I think that's the beauty of social media, I guess, in general, because it allowed me to connect to experts like you guys who are actually authorities of the field. So, what is your take on Attorney Trixie Cruz Angeles' statement on questioning historical events? Maybe we can start with Vec.
Ryan, historical facts, the established historical facts are products of historical research, of tedious and rigorous historical research. So, questioning these facts arguably is actually the lifeblood of history as a discipline. Because if you don't question established facts, so the historical research and the field as in general wouldn't really prosper, right? So I agree to Trixie Angeles when she said that we shouldn't prohibit questioning established historical facts. Kasi yun naman talaga yung ginagawa natin. In light of new evidence, in light of new perspective, perhaps given light by new methods in historical research, we can definitely question quote unquote established facts. But iba yung pag-question mo. It's different when you question historical fact, established historical fact, dun sa malicious na pagsisinungaling or paglalay, or pagdi-distort ng katotohanan ng history. At yun yung kailangan nating bantayan personally. And I think yun yung siguro with the mandate of the state, for example, in education, halimbawa, or in propaganda, yun yung kailangang bantayan. So, questioning historical facts, we need to ask towards what ends and for whose interest. So yun yung tingin kong we have to be wary of. But we really cannot we really cannot prohibit questioning, mahalaga yon actually. I think kahit sa anong academic discipline, we need to question and question because it is the only way that we can refine what we know, right?
Right. Thank you so much, Vec. What about you, Lee? Your take
Ako,
on yeah.
I want to highlight how insidious this statement is from this lawyer, Trixie Cruz Angeles, kasi this is a statement as if saying na, there should be discourse, as if it's us historians who's trying to limit discourse. But we know that in the first place, this statement is born out of a defense of or not really a defense, but a conscious effort to try to reshape the way we see martial law. And what's more insidious about this is that this is coming from a spokesperson of the state who can actually employ violence, right, against its people. And we have seen that even in the past, particularly during martial law. I think that's my problem with this statement. Because for academics, it makes a lot of sense because that's what we do, as Beck discussed. But we should really analyze this, that this is coming from a state spokesperson, that it's the state who is wanting to have discourse about a particular issue that it wants to reshape, and that is martial law.
Got it. Thank you so much for your statements, Lee and Vec. Now we'll be going on a quick commercial break, but when we get back, we got more questions for the amazing team behind podcast. Again, check them out. The links to their official Facebook page and their podcast are actually up on Neo Retro 1059's Facebook Live as well. So that being said, again, quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere.
We're playing the soundtrack of your life. We are Neo Retro 1059.
9:28 on the clock. Welcome back to First Hit. Still with us via Facebook Live, also on air at Neo Retro 105.9. We got the amazing team behind podcasts. We got Vec Alporha and Sir Lee. Good morning, guys.
Hello.
Morning.
Good morning. All right. Before we took a commercial break, we did talk about Attorney Trix Cruz Angeles, of course, incoming PCOO chief statement. And I believe, Vec, you wanted to add something to that before we move on to the next question?
Yes, ang gusto ko lang sabihin, bring it on. Because she's effectively saying that, we should reopen the historical discourse on martial law to debate. So we say, bring it on. Maganda nga yan that you start questioning. Because, you know what? The main problem actually from our side as historians, regarding the problem that punched us in the face this 2022 elections, was that we didn't talk about it enough, right? Like after the Marcoses were ousted, we became very confident that people love democracy and hate dictatorship. We forgot that a good number of people were actually remained supportive of Marcos. So by reopening this to debate, so I hope we can be given the platform to remind the people just how dark this period was in our history, what really happened, and what was the reason why the Marcoses, despite their overwhelming access to power, were successfully deposed and exiled in 1986. So yun lang.
Got it. Got it. All right. I want to actually move on to a point that you said a while ago about discourse and about, I guess, access to information, because I was reading an article, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, released on Rappler. And one of the authors of said article said that there is a lack of access to safe and intellectual spaces where historians could connect with the Filipino public. Now, again, as you guys are the experts in the field, I want to know whether, or I want to know your opinion on that statement. Like, do you think there is a lack of access to safe and intellectual spaces where historians like yourselves could connect with the Filipino public? Maybe we can start with Lee.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, what are traditionally the spaces where intellectuals could connect, or like public intellectuals can connect to the masses? No, we have perhaps traditional media, we have education, but I think it's not about having this platform, because it's really social media, and the way that the gatekeeping of traditional media is practically not effective in social media. So as much as social media is also a platform for us experts to talk to a general audience, we are somehow we are somehow not really being heard, because there's a lot of this cacophony of voices from different people, and some of them unfortunately don't have the expertise to talk about what they are talking about. So there is a platform, but the problem is the platform is problematic, and I think that's the answer to that question. Idagdag pa natin na yung education din natin is not, there's a lot of problems with the history education in the Philippines. Like, I think a few years ago, tinanggal yung pagtuturo ng kasaysayan sa high school. So imagine if you are, at least during your time, Ryan, and during our time as well, when we were in high school, our first year high school is dedicated to Philippine history. And then just a short 3 years after that, we go to college, and perhaps during the freshman year, you take your history one or kasaysayan one. But now imagine high school students, they spend 6 years in high school, not a single history subject. And then when they go to college, they're expected to take this course called Readings in Philippine History, where they read primary sources in Philippine history. So imagine that disconnect. Now, why am I now going to be reading primary sources from the Spanish period, for example, samantalang yung Philippine history subject ko nahuli, grade 6 pa ako. 6 years ago. I'm a completely different person now. So, I think that's one problematic platform, education as well. Perhaps Beck can add some more.
Please do.
Well, compared to perhaps 10 years ago, mas marami na ngang platform ngayon kung saan pwedeng mag-engage ang historians or public intellectuals to the people because, we have social media. But the problem is that we cannot assume that these platforms are vacuums, ano. Marami ng mga lumabas na pag-aaral saying that particular sectors with particular agenda actually use these platforms to their advantage, and in effect mas madaming reach yung propaganda, for example. So para siyang naging counterproductive for us. But at the same time, I think um, we also need to address the problem of the pervasive anti-intellectualism that we have at present, kung saan the voices of experts and of scholars are kind of undermined. Ano, I think that that's also a problem na kailangan nating i-engage right now. Pero at the same time, we need to have a more, I don't know, perhaps structural analysis regarding this issue. Like, bakit kasi why are people um why are a lot of people inclined into believing historical distortion, for say for example of the history of martial law, right? So we can say na there's a there's a specific there are specific grievances that they experienced in the post EDSA system right now that made them, no matter how untruthful, made them nostalgic of the martial law years, fed by the systemic historical distortion that's been happening, that's been being facilitated by these people for many years already. So, mas malalim yung problema, ano. Hindi lang siya kakulangan ng access or ng platform for historians and for history teachers to reach broader audiences. Kasi kung platforms at accessibility ang pag-uusapan, mas madami talagang access ngayon. Pero tulad nung sinabi ni Lee, we are competing against cacophony of, we are competing against this, um, noisy swamp of lies and distortion that we really need to address.
Got it. So the platforms are problematic. I actually want to jump ahead and go to a question that's related to I guess what Vec brought up a while ago, about people being nostalgic, about people I guess clinging on to, or the lack of I guess what's the proper word for this? The lack of retention is the word I'm probably looking for, because I've heard many people say Filipinos easily forget or have forgotten our own history. What do you as experts have to say about that? Like, do you agree with this? Do Filipinos easily forget or have forgotten our own history? Maybe we can start with Lee.
Well, I think I think it's not really the responsibility of, well, I don't want to say it, but of course people forget. I mean, if
Mm.
if you are a person who had to work uh 10 hours a day to feed your family, how can you have any regard for the past? No.
Mhm.
You would think na um Filipinos, the poorer they are or the more impoverished they are, the more that they really want to have a regard for things like this, things like heritage, like history, because that's not their concern, which all the more makes them a lot more it's easier to feed them lies, because at that point they're really not concerned about what's the truth anyway. That could be a very bad view of the general public. But I think it's not really about forgetting, but it's about remembering, and what the state or what society allows us to remember, or enables us to remember.
Got it. What about you, Vec?
I would like to follow up on Lee's idea on remembering, on this being a problem of remembering rather than a problem of forgetting. Ano. So, and also I think, because I would like to say that it's kind of hard, or it's not fair for us to dump all of these on the public, right? Like they have the responsibility to remember how difficult life was, or how corrupt people were during martial law, for example, how corrupt the president was, and or the entire government was. I mean, they're just like what Liv mentioned, parang burdened na nga sila na suungin yung traffic araw-araw, papunta at pauwi galing trabaho. At, willing, burdened na nga sila to deal with high prices of commodity, for example. And then you still expect them to have this, to be concerned about these things. That's not fair. All right. So that's why I'm not really comfortable accusing the Filipino people of, being forgetful, right? Or being unwise regarding their choices, of course, because they will always be coming from their immediate needs, eh. 'Di ba? Pakiba nila kung corrupt si Marcos nung panahon niya. Pakiba nila kung maraming mga tinorture at pinatay. As far as they're concerned, from their perspective, there's a new government promising all of these things that the previous governments in immediate memory failed to give. That, right? So, yun. So I think Filipino people don't easily forget, right? Kasi halimbawa, for example, itong previous election, maraming mga lugar din naman na nakaranas ng sobra-sobrang pagpapahirap nung panahon ng diktadurya, yung hindi bumoto kay Marcos. Right? So, yes. So, ayun. So, sa akin lang, let's not expect too much from a people who's already suffering and who's already oppressed by the day-to-day mechanism of how we are governed, how our economy is being managed by the people from above.
Right. I think it kind of goes back to, just again as a backgrounder. I think we all at one point not interacted, I'd say, but like at one point we're within the same environment of UP Los Baños, and I come from the College of Human Economy tuloy, sorry. LSE nasa isip ko. College of Human Ecology. And sobrang ina-emphasize doon yung Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think to Vec and Lee's point, right? It's all about, I guess, satisfying the basic needs before they can even have the headspace to think about anything else. That being said, I want to move on to the next question. Another hot topic issue when it comes to post 2022 elections, or even maybe during even the campaign period itself, which is all about historical revisionism. Now, a lot of people are wondering, or at least may not be familiar with that. So let's talk about it. What does historical revisionism mean? And is it actually possible to revise history? Maybe we can start with Vec.
Alam mo, Ryan, we have clarified already this concept many times. Personally, ako sawan ako dito. Pero pag-usapan natin yung historical revisionism na I think napasadahan natin earlier, in the interview. If you are a historical researcher, to a certain extent, you'd always be engaged in revisionism, right? So, yung teacher ko during my graduate studies in Diliman, si Dean Det Abrera, would simply put it this way, that there's two kind of revisionism. One that is done for the advancement of the discipline, the academic kind of revisionism, whereas in light of new evidence, you're going to change certain ideas about the past, So, ano ba yung naiisip nating evidence? Ano example dyan? For example, yung medyo niche to, no? Pero yung lugar kung saan ginanap yung first Easter Sunday Mass, di ba? So may episode kami about that. Pero for many years during the Spanish period, um the people widely believe that it was in Butuan. But in light of new evidence of, clarifications, sa Limasawa pala. So yung mga ganong klaseng revisionism, that's something that's regularly done by historians. So pero I think yung pinupunto nung tanong na 'to ay yung pag-distort ng kasaysayan, yung negative kind of historical revisionism or yung kanina pa natin binabanggit na historical distortion. Whereas you change certain ideas and knowledge about the past in order to escape accountability, for example, in order to cover up crimes done by institutions and by individuals. So yun yung mahirap, ano. That's something that we need to tackle head on. And I think may dagdag sila dito sa idea ito.
Yes, please go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, I'm thinking kailangang labanan yung historical distortion. But I think at the same time, kasi when we already know that when we say revisionism, this is the illegitimate kind. This is the kind that we should fight. Bakit? Kasi merong agenda behind it. When historians revise history, we do it in light of new evidence, sabi nga ni Beck, or new analysis, new interpretation. But when it's the state that's doing it, parang itong sinasabi nga ni babalik kay Trixie Cruz Angeles, no, discourse kuno. Pero alam naman natin na distortion yung gustong gawin kasi yung current mainstream knowledge about a particular aspect of the past martial law doesn't really agree with whoever's in power. So perhaps talagang merong army na naka-assign para i-distort yung history. And historical distortion happens not only in the academe. There are historians who do historical distortion, mind you, we know some. But at the same time, it could also happen in other platforms and largely through propaganda. At imagine, I think dito mismo sa ating Facebook Live, may nagko-comment na huwag paniwalaan ng libro, 'di ba? Kasi marami raw sa libro hindi totoo. I think indication 'yan na ito talagang historical distortion ay nangyayari talaga sa social media. And these kinds of messages are indicative of how problematic it has been in social media and how easy it is to distort history through propaganda.
Got it. Well, on that note, I think we're going to have to take a quick commercial break. But when we get back, we got one more round of questions with Lee and Vec. Again, the amazing team behind podcasts, PODKAS. Check them out on Spotify. They also got their website and, of course, social media platforms. So just click on the links. We did post them on Neo Retro 1059's Facebook page. So facebook.com/1059 Neo Retro is the web page that you guys need to go to. And simply click on the link. We'll be back right after this.
We are playing the soundtrack of your life. We are Neo Retro 1059, the one.
9:53 on the clock. Still with us, we got the amazing team behind podcasts. We got Vec Alporha and Lee Candelaria. Now, I see the comment section a buzzing. And I, for one, am grateful that at least there are some comments that say they think the topic is great. They've learned a lot. And as we wind down on the program, because we are 7 minutes away from 10 a.m. right? I want to end on at least two questions. So I'm gonna go with my next one, which is what makes the history of the Filipino people unique? Because I think what makes this conversation really interesting is that Lee over here, again, is a teaching fellow at Hiroshima. Vec is going to go to Hawaii for her PhD, and their perspectives on world history in general is, I feel like, is so vast. So I think, again, going back to them being the experts on the matter, I want to know what makes our history, like the history of the Filipino people, extremely, or not, maybe not extremely, but like what makes it unique compared to others, right? Maybe we can start with Lee.
Yeah, so Ryan, I think as historians we need to say this, that our history is not unique. And uniqueness is not something that we strive for when we write history. In fact, what we want to do is connect the Philippines to the region, to the rest of the world, to say that our experience as a people is practically patterned after the experience of the world. And within these interconnections, actually, we see the rationale for or the rationale for this study of history, because we don't exist in a vacuum as a people. Our experiences don't make us any special. We are not the chosen people, because there's also a tendency to write history like that in the past, to say that the Philippines, we were named after the king of Spain, but the king of Spain was named after an apostle of Jesus. So we are a chosen people because we are the Philippines. Yeah, I think stuff like that don't really account for um, the connections we have with the rest of the world. And
Mm.
perhaps with that kind of analysis of how we are not unique, we can also stop being, easy targets of Pinoy baiting online. And perhaps also it could aid us in understanding or at least make us realize the need to understand our own history, that because we are not unique, we should know more about our history so that we can connect ourselves not only to our Filipino-ness, our identity, but to the rest of the world.
Got it. Thank you for that, Lee. What about you, Vec?
I agree dun sa sinabi ni D, ano. We need to understand that, for example, when we were colonized in the 16th century, a lot of other parts of the world was also undergoing the same process, right? When we experienced the Second World War, na laging inaaral ni Lee, a lot of countries in the Pacific and in other parts of the world also experienced the war. So, for example, we had this tragic story of our comfort women, women who were systematically abused by by the invaders during the war. So, meron ding mga ganyan sa Korea, sa China, sa ibang bahagi ng Southeast Asia. So, when we had a dictator in the 70s, for example, marami ding mga diktador ang lumitaw sa iba't ibang bahagi ng mundo, like in Asia, in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, and in Africa. So you see, we need to see. I think there's a value in understanding our historical development alongside the development of the world. Kasi I learned this from a guest sa podcast that we had recently. Medyo may sakit tayong mga Pilipino daw, sabi niya, na kapag merong isang bagay na tragic na nangyayari sa atin, parang lagi nating sinisisi yung sarili natin na kasi ang sama-sama ng mga Pilipino, ang bulok-bulok ng mga Pilipino, kaya tayo nagkakaroon ng mga economic crisis, for example. Hindi laging ganon. May mga corrupt na Pilipino, but it's not always the case. All right? So, that's one thing. Kaya I agree with Lee when we say, we cannot say that our history is unique. All right? Siguro merong mga parts na na fascinating. For example, there are some historians or economists, for example, who would say na parang mas close yung pattern ng economic development natin kesa sa Latin America. Mas close yung pattern ng economic development natin sa Latin America kumpara sa mga kapitbahay natin sa Southeast Asia. In that sense, we can say that we are unique. But generally speaking, how we underwent ups and downs, in history, it is something that we can trace with the rest of the world. And in this period of a very globalized society, mahalaga yon. I think more than anything, more than national unities or, I think we also need to establish unities or I hate that word right now, or solidarities with the global south or with our fellow post-colonial countries and societies. There's value to that, Ryan.
Got it. And as we close the program, I want to end on this. Rappler again released an opinion article that is titled "The Burden and Demand of Historical Reflection," where it talked about why history, or rather, why studying history is important. And I think that's the whole thesis of our discussion, anyway. So that being said, as we end, Lee and Vec, why do we need to reflect on and study history? What value is it for, let's say, myself? I'm a Filipino in 2022. Why do I need to reflect on and study history? Maybe we can start with Lee on this one.
Yeah, we actually have this is the first episode of podcast. So if you're interested to hear a longer answer, but I think for me, studying history really is something that contributes to our identity. Right? If you want to know more about yourself, if you want to know more about your country, if you want to know more about being a Filipino, then you would be interested to study history. Um, our lives as individuals are connected to this greater narrative of the nation, and with that, with that realization, then you will have more sense of being. You will have parang you will strive more in this life, trying to prove yourself na I'm part of that narrative, and yet I can also change that narrative. No, we are not just passive receivers of our history. We are um, change makers. We are agents of change as individuals. So through the study of history, we can actually realize that. We could realize how powerful we are. If we're not happy with whatever is happening right now on our country or in our country in this world, then perhaps we can look back at history and look at the triumphs and travails of being a Filipino or being just a human being in this world. And we can see how much change we can make. And we can learn that through history.
Got it. What about you, Vec?
I would like to follow up on that na yung sinabi ni Lee. I think history is also a quest for self-knowledge. It's about knowing yourself. And if you know about yourself, then you would be aware of what you are capable of. And I think that's very important, you know. Lagi nating sinasabi that, you know, those who don't learn from history is doomed to repeat it. And that, you know, that cliche. Sawa na rin ako dyan. Pero I think more than that, we should treat history as, you know, as a repository of good ideas as well. Hindi lang naman ito repository ng mga mistakes in the past na hindi na natin pwedeng ulitin. I think more than that, our history can also give us a lot of good ideas on how to deal with current problems. So, and that's part of, you know, that's something that we can get out of knowing ourselves, or sabi nila, deriving our identity from our past, you know, having this sense of self-knowledge, being aware of what we were capable of, what level of ingenuity, or maybe what level of brutality as well, as a society, as a nation, perhaps even as a species, as human beings. So yun na lang. So if you want to know yourself, then and if you want to use your knowledge of the past for that, then study history.
Got it. And on that note, I can think of a better way to end the program. Thank you so much to Lee and Vec for, well, dropping by at 9 in the morning here at the station. Before we let you go, the floor is yours. How can people connect to podcasts? Where can they find you? Please go ahead.
You can find us on Facebook. We are also on all our social media, Twitter, Instagram. We are on LinkedIn as well. We are also on YouTube. So if there are a lot of people who are not into podcasts, but they're into YouTube, so just go to YouTube. YouTube, our channel is podcast. But of course, you can also find us in traditional podcast platforms or wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and a lot more platforms.
So, and if you want to learn more about the show, so head over to our website, that's podcast.org. So you can keep track of our past seasons and past episodes. So I think this Saturday, we're already releasing our season finale for season 4, our current season. Hindi na bago yan. And then after that, we'll take a break and we'll be back with the new season. So sana pakinggan nyo yung mga episodes sa susunod ng podcast.
Got it. Thank you so much, Lee and Vec, and to everybody who tuned in via Facebook, via Mixler, or on the radio. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, you guys got a lot of golden nuggets. Really, I was gonna say like 1 or 2, but nah. Really, I got like more than 2. So hopefully, you guys got the same as well. So again, podcast is on Spotify. Their official website will also be linked to the description on this Facebook Live on Neo Retro 1059's Facebook page, facebook.com/1059 Neo Retro. Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you so much, Vec, and thank you so much to everybody who tuned in during this discussion. Up next, we got Justin for the knockout from 4 to 8 p.m. So make sure to tune into him. All right, you're listening to Neo Retro 1059, the one.
Live from Manila. You're listening to the one station.